Hello and welcome to another Boilers Extra Purdue Coaching Search Diary. Thought we'd do a lot of these this week, and it actually, as it turns out, we kind of backed off a little bit, let the portal open up and fill up with Purdue players, and try to see where we stood on intel. Sam from the Journal and Courier. I'm just going to introduce you. Nathan Barrett, Indy Star, Sam King, Journal and Courier. But you are in the Mackey Arena press room. I can see there.
I am.
Yeah, you are. You were covering some volleyball tonight. Boilermaker volleyball moving on to the Sweet 16 round.
Yes. And, one of the more notable people here is Purdue Athletic Director Mike Bobinski was at the match last night and tonight. Tonight was pretty noticeable.
What? He's not on a jet somewhere that we can track? And
right. He's not going to tell you where he's going. Anyway, just from I probably watched Bobinski behind me as much as I was watching the volleyball in front of me. He was kind of schmoozing with some board members. Purdue President Mung Chang was here in the back of the room, and they were talking. And it seemed to me just, this is kind of stuff that happens when you've got your person in place, and now you're talking to the board, talking to the president, kind of laying out some things. That doesn't mean you announce it yet, because ideally, those coaches probably has a game tonight or tomorrow for a conference championship. So, but no, I think this thing probably is, if it's not a done deal, they at least have extended an offer to somebody and are getting the feel of the board and the president.
I've done some radio interviews today, people wanting to get updates. And what I've been telling them is, and I was just telling you kind of a different version of this, but there's aspects of this that feel a lot like 2016 to me when they hired Jeff Brom, where they were, he had been identified pretty early on as someone Mike Bobinski really wanted, but the substantive negotiations didn't take place until after the Conference USA Championship game, because these guys owe it to their teams to not have their next job become a distraction as they're trying to win a conference championship. And I think Purdue to some extent probably expected the same from Jeff Brom in 22. I don't remember from your perspective on how that really played out, but it wasn't exactly a stunning moment when he left to go to Louisville, but no official announcements were happening, right? So Mike Bobinski has operated quietly on these things in the past. I remember when he was hired as AD, it was fairly quiet right up until very shortly before he was introduced, frankly. So as we've gotten later in this week, we don't have like hard intel about who it definitely is. We have over the course of the week been able to pick off who it's not. And all indications to me were that it's very likely, it could be wrong, but very likely that Purdue's next coach is coaching some group of 5 team this weekend. Most likely a group of 5 team this weekend.
Yeah, I would say that too. There's probably a list of 5 that, we can whittle it down to from that vantage point. So, I think that just kind of in all fairness and from a professional level, you don't like you said, you don't want that to be a distraction, but you also want to give that coach, the courtesy of telling his players, his athletic administrators that, hey, we had a great year and I'm going to parlay this into going to coach at Purdue.
It's been interesting. I've been, talking to people around the Big Ten and beyond over the course of this week. I've got a story that we're recording this pretty late on Friday night. That's why I called this day 6, because did it start on Sunday or is Saturday day 6? Because Bobinski said that on Monday. I don't know. It's day 6. You can take your pick as to which day that applies to, but talked to a couple of people this week. I talked to one person in particular who, and protecting anonymity here, like somebody who is on the staff of a coach whose name has come up on hot boards this season, I would say, a name that's just been floating out there. And I was like, I said something like that. Oh, well, would you know if that person was involved? And they were like, maybe. Maybe like they kind of, it depends on the coach. And sometimes they play these things close to the vest, even from the people that are around them the most. So it's been a pretty quiet week. Somebody used the word crickets when I was talking to them over the course of the last couple of days about what this has been like, just kind of out on the national scene. But I also was given some reassurances that um, Purdue is there are definitely sitting head coaches interested in this job. And I think that is not necessarily a given. I think you make those assumptions when you start looking at these processes, but you have to remember it was, this was a bad year. And we're going to get into what's happening with the portal, but you don't know how many of your best players, if any, are going to be on this roster next year. It could be a gutted roster against a really tough schedule. It's going to be a tough start. I do not think there is any coach on the planet, probably, including Kurt Signetti, but you can pick someone better than him, who could come in and take this situation to a playoff next year. I think that's just not attainable. But the Indiana example has also cited to me by multiple people I was talking to as to why this is still a good job, because people have won here, and then Indiana reminds you can be a losing program 3 years in a row and go 11-1 the next year.
Yeah, and now with the revenue sharing coming in, the power conference teams are just going to get stronger. You would perceive. Now you still have to beat out the teams in your own conference, which is that's a tall task for Purdue, especially where it is right now. But the problem is, if you take it as immediate perception based on the last thing you've seen, which is 66-0 against Indiana to finish up 1-11, doesn't look like a great job. But when you factor in that it's a program that has had some success, is in the Big Ten, is going to have, if we believe Mike Boilermaker Monday, which I do to some degree, all the resources needed to get what that person needs to compete, then I say, yeah, it is probably a good job to take, especially if you are at a group of 5 program and you're looking for that next step and kind of want to challenge yourself and see if you can compete at that level.
Let's talk about resources, because there's been a development in that this week that I think is important. On Monday, Mike Boilermaker said those things you said about well-resourced, and this person's got to have a strategy, and Purdue's going to fully participate in the revenue share. That was on Monday. On Tuesday, Purdue posted a job for the person who's going to handle the revenue share. Somebody I talked to referred to this as sort of maybe kind of the equivalent of a pro football capologist. Now, it's going to apply to all sports. It's not just going to be football, but detail a little bit for people what that is and why that might be important.
Yeah. So I just kind of randomly was poking around on the job board on Purdue's career site and stumbled across.
Are you applying to be the Purdue football head coach?
Yes. And there was a job title that said Associate Athletics Director, Resource Management. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. And just kind of reading through the job description and what is required for the person who will be hired. This is a person who's going to kind of associate themselves with everything that comes from the NCAA versus House settlement, the revenue sharing, NIL, things of that nature. They want somebody with a lot of experience and background in athlete representation, contracts, salary cap, NIL. I think it lists all those, probably a combination of 6 to 8 years of experience, at least, doing some sort of work in all of that. But yeah, this to me sounds like somebody that's going to handle all of the stuff that you don't want, probably people in your football program, your athletics department to deal with. Somebody who's just strictly kind of like an agent almost, to some degree, that kind of understands money and how to set people up in the best circumstance possible to benefit themselves.
I'm interested in how they will go with this. This past 2 seasons, Noah Joseph was on this staff as the general manager. Noah, with a long background as an on-field coach, and I think that's maybe ultimately where his heart is, and maybe where he goes next in his career. I don't know. Maybe he'll try to stay in this realm because it is important in this era of college football. But a long background in that. That's not what this position is going to be.
No.
This position to me sounds like one of 2 things: either someone who will come from outside of a college athletic department, someone who maybe has worked in for an apparel company, someone who has worked for some other kind of sports management entity, and getting someone with that background, or someone who has come through a college football either like a recruiting operation. The one that I cite a lot is just the one that Mark Pantoni has run at Ohio State, going back to when Urban Meyer was there, and how that became a place where they just churned in, 5 stars and top 100 guys. But it was a very professional operation, and a lot of the people who came up with him have now gone off to be. When NAL started, you started seeing a lot of those names pop up other places, and people who have a background in that sort of thing and are more focused on, they're more schooled in it. They are more facile in just the way the world works, and I could see it being like either one of those two backgrounds, maybe. Either, again, coming up through a college football program, but with that specific background, or with, like I said, kind of more just like a sports management or even a legal background.
Yeah, and Mike Bobinski said Monday, and he had to say this really, and I don't think any of us were shocked that he said it. Purdue was behind the 8 ball in this whole NIL thing, and just the Purdue people who donate and such.
I would quibble with that terminology. I would say that he said that the world changed in a way that didn't favor Purdue.
Right.
And that could possibly be, I'll let you finish your point. That could possibly be because this is a rural school. It's not Minneapolis. It's not Ohio State. It's not a 100,000 seat stadium. And that disadvantages you. It's a different kind of fan base in that way. It could also mean that the world changed in a way that didn't work for Purdue, because Purdue is very resistant to change as an institution. And, it was July 2022 before they founded a booster collective. Right. That alone tells you that they were slow getting things going. That was one. They disadvantaged themselves a little bit, but go ahead and finish what you were saying.
Yeah, he said it kind of evolved. Trying to find the exact phrase that he used here. It was a challenge for a variety of reasons. Our folks don't necessarily respond normally to the way NIL evolved in the recent past. And I do believe that there are some people who probably who are connected to the Purdue athletic department that thought NIL was, not that it was a fad or something like that, but that, like, yeah, we don't need to throw all our money in this to compete. Purdue is going to do it the Purdue way. And it became evident pretty quickly that, the schools with the most money are getting the best players and kind of flipping things around if they were behind. And also the schools that are the Michigans and Ohio States of the world and the Oregons of the world, in that regard, the rich just kind of got richer.
It's tough because on one hand, I don't like to just give my money away. I'm judicious about who I give my money to. Ice cream companies largely. But if you're a donor out there and you find the current state of college football distasteful, if you don't like the idea of college athletics, of players getting large sums of money to play, I'm not going to get into the philosophical argument of it, but if the person with the money feels that way, you shouldn't probably be forced to go along with this. At the same time, if you do want Purdue to be competitive in that space, you have to participate as a donor if you have that sort of ability. But also, I think that this is an indication to me, this job posting, that Purdue is taking things more seriously than they were taking it last week. Now, I know this job may have actually been in the works for a while. Like, they don't usually just, you have to get those things approved down the line. So it's not like Bobinski left that press conference on Monday and just had an epiphany and was like, oh, hey,
I'm going to post a job on our website.
So take dictation on this as he's walking down the call with Patrick Crawford. Like, take dictation, Patrick. Let's do a job posting. Like, no, it had to go through channels and processes to be. So it's been in the works for a while, but it's an indication. And frankly, I think Purdue needed to put out indications that it is taking this sort of thing seriously, because I was that piece that I was talking about that I wrote that'll be up Saturday morning. Talking to just like national media people, even there was, because they talk to coaches and they talk to assistants and they talk to agents. Like, they're much more, like, they've got a lot more contacts than I do. That's why I like to get those guys' opinions. And there's definitely a vibe out there. If you're interested in this job, but you look and you see not what's going on right now. We'll talk about what's going on right now. It's very explainable. But you look back to last fall and you see Nick Scouton and Deion Burks leave, and you wonder, well, is that just going to happen every year here? Are we ever going to be able to keep somebody long enough to develop them to the end of their career and take advantage of having a program, to actually have a program, or is it just going to be a churn? I think that's a question that Purdue has to answer. And in some ways, it's not fair. There's some specific things, especially with Nick Scouton, that I don't know that Purdue would have been able to match to bring him back, even if it had more money, because Texas A&M, he's from Texas, all that stuff. But it's definitely a larger question that I think Purdue has to answer. And I think it's good of them that they, probably not coincidental, that they got this job posting up, because then they can take it to the people that they're interviewing and say, this is what we're doing. Like, this is who you're going to be. This person will be at your disposal.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm sure that I'm not sure, but I'm guessing every candidate who has interviewed for this job or has been reached out to and inquired an interest in this job has probably asked, what is the plan for this revenue share, for getting players money? How are we going to get these guys in there? And then, like you said, how are we going to keep these guys? Because right now, the portal is filling up with a bunch of Purdue players and other Power 4 schools who have fired their head coach. The only players that are available to go in until December 9th are players
and grad transfers can go in too.
Grad transfers, and then players who are at a school that had a coaching change. So a lot of these Purdue players are getting in there before, and a ton of them have offers already. I think Jerron Tibbs said he was in the portal, and 5 minutes later had an offer from Louisville, which isn't surprising because Jeff Brom had recruited him when he was in high school. But these guys going in the portal is not the first time that these coaches are reaching out to them, and many times, they've at least been asked what their interest is, and then now they're getting a chance to kind of test that market and see where they fit and how much they're worth. And then if Purdue hires a coach and they like that coach, they do still have the option to come back if the head coach reciprocates that and says, hey, we need you back on our team.
Yeah, coaching relationships are more valuable than ever in that regard, the recruiting relationships, and you really do not burn any bridges anymore in recruiting, because that guy could be available again a year later after he picks a school that isn't you, or 2 years later, or 4 years later, or in the case of the COVID guys, 6 years later, though we're done with those now, thankfully. And I want to make sure that I clarify something I said before when I was bringing up this new resource management AD, associate AD, as opposed to the general manager. The football team, I absolutely believe, will still have a general manager. Like, they're still going to have someone who is doing like something what Noah Joseph was doing, and will still be helping that, figure out that roster. And then this person is going to be over the whole athletic department. This is going to be a different role. The other person's maybe going to be a little bit more granular too, just with the football program and dealing with the players directly. And the other is maybe going to be just more administrative. So just so that differential's out there. Let's talk about the portal though. We're recording this Friday night. Max Clare went in the portal today. Will Helt went in the portal today. You mentioned Dylan Thieneman was already in the portal. Ryan Brown, Marcos Davila in the portal, the two of the three scholarship quarterbacks that were on the roster for next season. Although Sawyer Anderson now is having signed up earlier this week on signing day. Who am I forgetting? Like of like people that would be potential different. Teron Grant, who started on opening day this year. I mentioned that before. Like the guys who were in that freshman class, who I thought you wanted to try to keep those guys because that's your bridge to the future. That's year 2, year 3, those guys who should be starting for you. And all of these guys, a lot of these guys, I wouldn't say all these guys. There are definitely some guys who I think went in the portal to leave. A lot of these guys are saying they're keeping their options open to come back to Purdue, but they're also going to be now exposed to the best offers of everybody in the country, which legally they weren't supposed to get before. You're not supposed to be able to contact people until they're in the portal.
Yeah. And a lot of these guys, Yanni Karloftis is one that's a name, but he's graduated. It makes sense for him to go in the portal, even if there wasn't a coaching change. Muhammad Musa is a lineman who started for 3 years. He's, I think he's a guy who's graduated as well. Derek Rogers is a guy who started some last year. It was a lot of players that were in that 2024 signing class. Jerron Tibbs is a name that has done some things at Purdue. Coy Beasley was a big name out of high school. Didn't play a whole lot this year, but was somebody who was expected to come here and over the course of his career be a difference maker. So yeah, those are probably the big ones. Aside from, I thought the four guys that Purdue absolutely had to keep, whoever the new head coach was, were Dylan Thieneman, Will Helt, Max Clare, and Devin Maccabee. And three of those four guys are in the portal. Devin Maccabee really wants to stay at Purdue. But, you can be persuaded pretty easily in this day and age by the right coach and the right checkbook.
There's a lot of factors at play as it comes to these individual players. Let's also not forget that Mike Bobinski was up front when asked on Monday. It's not just coaches that these guys bring in with him, probably. If he's a sitting head coach, he's probably bringing players. Kurt Cignetti did. Other coaches who made this jump have done that. And if maybe the player that he's bringing with him is his star player that plays your position, like that's a thing that you have to be ready for. And by going in the portal now, you can start the process of giving yourself options. I think it's all just about having options. All of us in our professions, and I know there's people who don't like this to be talked about like a profession, but all of us in our professions at some point or another have to give ourselves options, look around, be prepared. And I think that's what these players are by and large doing. I think what else we need to cover for tonight. Go ahead.
And this can strictly be players protecting themselves, because a new head coach can come in, and we saw this 2 years ago with Ryan Walters, and there's no guarantee that that coach is going to keep you. He has no ties to you. He's
Correct.
got a different system, different idea, and that coach can come in and say, hey, thanks for your commitment to Purdue football, but we're moving in a different direction that doesn't include you. So if you want to get in the portal and go somewhere else, now you're just kind of jumping the gun and getting there before that could potentially happen.
And considering the timeline we're working with here, like, I don't know if we'll get an answer Saturday or Sunday. I would think by Monday at some point we'll know who the head coach is.
It will leak out probably over the weekend, I would imagine.
I would say it very likely. We're trying to create that leak, but someone will leak it along this path. But the only way your market value is only established when you have those other offers. And that's a factor here. So if you're someone like Dylan Thieneman, from just talking to people around him, like, he doesn't, he loves Purdue. He came here for a reason. But now that you are out there on the open market, it's possible. I don't know that this has happened. I'm just using his as an example. Do you get an offer that you really can't refuse? And especially when you just don't know, it's not just you don't know who the coach is going to be. You really just don't know what this team is even going to look like next year. And do you want to go through another 1-11 season, even if that's just what this program has to go through to get through to the other side of success? There's just a lot of factors that are at play here for these guys. And I am of the opinion that it is as messy as this is, it's better than a system where these guys' futures is just dictated to them. I don't think that's fair either, especially in these coaching change situations. So a lot of this portal stuff is just getting started. I mean, yes, it's a fairly narrow window, but like the fired coaches, players are already in. Then it opens for real on Monday. And then as playoff teams get eliminated, those guys start jumping in. I was having lunch today on my way back from Penn State. Boy, that was a mess last night. We don't have to talk about it. We'll probably come back to basketball at some point, but not tonight. But it's talking to another Big Ten reporter at lunch today, and about, is so-and-so going to go in the portal? And it was like, well, like, when would he decide to do that? Because it was Ohio State reporter. Like, Ohio State's still playing potentially the national championship. And do you go in the portal if you're one snap away from being the starter at your position on a team that's trying to win the national championship? That's not necessarily obviously in the mind of the Purdue people, but there's a lot of factors that come into this. It's really not just wanting to escape something or wanting to go get money. There's a lot of factors that play into this.
Yeah, and without talking to every single person, we don't know what a lot of the Purdue players who have, because where we find out about most of this is on social media, who have announced that they're either in the portal or going in the portal, are very respectful of their time at Purdue, and also many of them have said, I am open to returning to Purdue, which tells me that they came here because they love the school, they love the academics, they love the football program. Something about West Lafayette and Purdue brought them here in the first place. So,
well, yeah, a person brought them here, or people brought them here. That's an important thing to remember here too. That Ryan Walters, say what you will about him and the job that the football team executed on the field, but by all accounts, a very compelling, charismatic guy behind closed doors when he interviewed here and on the recruiting trail. Like, that was his reputation. And then the individual assistant coaches, that your position coaches, that you are the guys who are directly recruiting you, that you develop a relationship with. That, especially in the case of this 2024 class, is important because guys like Teron Grant, Coy Beasley, because their coaches are no longer employed here, and you're going to have to now develop a relationship with somebody new. And how quickly you have to make how quickly you have to gauge that vibe. Again, it's just about giving yourself options. Who right now, as you're looking at this, let's take it back to kind of the ideas here, the potential identities here. I think we've eliminated a lot of just kind of like the retread names that were out there. As the week went on, one name that I looked at a little closer was Chuck Martin at Miami of Ohio, because to me, he might be the most Signetti of the guys that we've put on a lot of hot boards and other people have. Winning a couple national championships at Grand Valley State, was the offensive coordinator for a BCS national championship game team at Notre Dame. The record doesn't blow you away at Miami of Ohio, but he's won. If they win this year, it would be, I think, 3 championships in 6 years in the MAC, when they'd only won 3 in like, yeah, and they'd only won 3 MAC championships in like 40 years before that. I'm just saying that when Mike Bowinsky says, what I keep, the actual phrase was like, what we're going back to a winning coach, something like that. Like, that's a winning coach. He's won at every stop he's been at now, going back for a couple decades.
Yeah, and he knows Indiana well, has recruited Indiana well, and not that should be the main pinpoint, but you do want to win recruiting in your own state, especially when the other team that you're competing against is Notre Dame, and then now Indiana, for the most part, for those top end recruits. You want somebody who can, get in those houses and convince them why they should come to Purdue. He would fit the mold. He's in the MAC championship, playing Ohio tomorrow, which is almost today, here in the next 50 minutes or so. So that's a guy that's, and at first I kind of put him on a hot board and was like, yeah, he's 60 something. His record's around 500, I think, for his tenure there. But then you look at, what he's done in that conference and getting to bowl games. And a lot of times these MAC teams are taking a bye game that pretty much is an automatic loss early in the year anyway. So you got to throw out, probably at least one loss in the non-conference every year. I think he makes a lot of sense. I think there's, he and probably Tyson Helton at Western Kentucky are the two that probably make the most sense as making this an easy transition and getting you maybe back to respectability next year or the year after. And Tyson Helton today was in the conference championship game. It did not go well, I don't think, last time I saw the score. But
sorry, I had muted myself because I was typing, because I went to go check that score because I knew it was not good, and it got worse. It's 52-12. Rich Rodriguez and Jacksonville State opened up a can on Tyson Helton in Western Kentucky. And, Helton was involved the last time. For whatever reason, Purdue passed on him. And was, I think, a finalist the last time, but got passed over. That can sometimes be both good or bad, I suppose. I would say the thing that, as I pondered him over the course of the week and talked to people, it is a reminder that yes, there was actually a gap between him and Brom, where Mike Sanford was there and got fired after 2 years, like Ryan Walters did, and then he picked it back up and had success. But the success he's having there is not really the success Brom was having there. Like there's a big difference between being in the 8-9 win group and like the 10-11 win group, including conference championships and bowl games. Like when you can get into double digits, and Brom had started doing that. Had done that a couple of times in a row by the time Purdue hired him. I think that just demonstrates a different level of winning. So I'm not saying one way or the other that he's in or out of the running, but who is there anybody else that you've over the course of this week has built up in your attention?
I keep going back to you said Matt Campbell, and that's a name that's at the time, and I was kind of like, man, that's almost like a lateral move. And then he said, but if you could pay him more, I think that's a hard get because of what he's built at Iowa State, and the path to get into the playoff where he is right now seems much more feasible than coming to Purdue and trying to do it. John Summerall's a name that a lot of people have mentioned. I had started digging around with the Memphis coach, and I don't know how much is there. I think he's probably a name that because Memphis is
Ryan Silverfield.
Yeah, he's on every hot board of any power job that opens up. So I could see that.
I mentioned him to you because a conversation that I was having with someone out there, his name came up specifically, almost as if they were kind of trying to drop breadcrumbs to me. That's just, but I could be wrong.
Well, it very much could be somebody we don't even see coming.
Sure.
And that wouldn't surprise me either. But if you're looking at it from the perspective that I am, that I'm thinking it's somebody who's a head coach, a successful head coach currently, and then you think of it as probably a guy with Midwest ties. I think that's why the two I mentioned probably make the most sense.
I believe Tulane football was also taking it. They're down 35-7 to another candidate in everyone's minds, Jeff Monken at Army, who is on his way to an 11-1 season and is going to be finished the year in the top 25. I mean, this is a weekend where just all the candidates it's like a battle royale. They're all just going at each other. At least again, the candidates in our minds.
Purdue coach.
Yeah. How important? So let's jump kind of ahead and imagine Wednesday.
I'll go back to Army real quick because I don't know if the opportunity to bring a group of players from there to Purdue is like it is some of these other places. So I don't know if that's a factor or not, but you think there's some different loopholes you'd have to go through on that regard.
Yeah, no, that is actually a very good point to bring up. Like it's a different institution altogether, and regardless of style of offense, I think that's actually a very astute point to make as it relates to him and whether that is the kind of hire that would make sense in this case.
You're not bringing the triple option to Purdue. I don't care how successful.
I don't think so. And that doesn't mean he has to run that. You kind of have to run that at service academies. You got smaller dudes up front. I'm not they're badass. I'm not saying they're not badass. Like I want them first through the door defending our country. They're just not 320 pounds. You can't, that doesn't really how that works at that level. Let's look ahead to next week. By the way, you did talk to Mike Bobinski kind of in passing, right? Tonight?
Yeah, and he was obviously very busy, and he's not going to stop schmoozing the board to talk to me. But this is going to get done next week. If it isn't done already, I would expect probably by Monday at the latest, we'll probably know who's going to be the next head coach of Purdue football.
Yeah. Next week could even be Sunday. It could, you know what I mean? Like there's the conference championship games are all wrapping up, and teams find their bowl destinations on Sunday and go on from there. How important is then winning the press conference when hiring someone who, because I think in 2022 with Ryan Walters, they did have to sell that a little bit. First time head coach, defensive guy. He was, again, young and charismatic and had done good things at Illinois and Missouri, so that helped. Is it important that Purdue gets someone who wins the press conference right away? And I guess I would extend it beyond that. Well, I guess let me just ask that question first. Like, how important is it that this name comes out and people automatically are kind of like, oh, Purdue really did something?
I think perception probably matters until you get into spring football, and then production matters. Clearly, you would love for everybody to be on board, because that's when you're ideally going to get donors to start spending their money or things of that nature. Obviously, the perception to 18 to 22, 23-year-olds who are looking for a place to maybe go to school and play football, that matters in the short term. But ultimately, it's going to be production, and not even maybe what we see in the spring, but obviously next year, the results are really what matters. And we keep using the Indiana example because it's close to us, and it's just such a stark contrast from what that program was a year ago. Kurt Signetti had a pretty good recruiting class, and a lot of that was because Indiana came out and waxed everybody this year, and kids said, I want to go be a part of that. That looks fun. So, that's I guess first and foremost where it starts is winning kind of sells itself.
That's true. Some of the hay is in the barn, though, before you're like 6-0, 7-0, 8-0. Like, you do a lot of your recruiting before it even gets to that point, but it definitely helped, and especially like keeping that class together, I'm sure. Something else that came up, I was talking to a former, a current assistant, and was talking about just the idea, because they on their own, I don't know if they'd even heard Mike Bobinski say this, but it said, Purdue has to get a winner. But for him, it's not even so much you have to get a winner because they will then go win games. You have to get a winner because they don't have to win the press conference, but they have to win the locker room. And, as soon as you hire a guy, all those players are going on their phone and Googling him, like Kurt Signetti told them that they all should last year. I guess he was telling the reporters more than the players, but players are going to do it. They're going to go look up your bio. They're going to look up your background. They're going to say, what has this guy done? What players has he had under him? They're going to do that for all the coordinators and assistants too. But like that credibility, I can't remember the way that he said it was like, you have to have instant credibility with the players. And it's a little bit different in this world just because everybody's coming and going, and it's a moving, the ground's moving beneath your feet at all times. But to a large part, I do think that is true. I think if you hire someone who players are kind of looking at sideways, that's probably the bad start more than how you and I and the fans react.
Yeah. And 2 years ago, to your point, there were a bunch of people when Jeff Brom went to Louisville who got in the portal and were gone before Ryan Walters even had a chance to sell himself to them.
Some of them went to Louisville, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, some of them did, but others went elsewhere.
Right.
And I don't know why that was. There were probably various reasons why those players transferred out, but the head coach probably feels like I would like to get a chance to get in a room with these people and tell them what I'm about to keep them here. If you don't ever get that opportunity because the second you're hired, they look up something about your bio and don't like it, then you're starting from behind the eight ball, kind of to get your feet wet here, I guess, in the first place.
Anything else? I'm pretty tired. I kind of want
to.
Well,
you've been across 4 states, I think. So
Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, back to Ohio, back to Indiana.
Do you go through West Virginia at all?
Yes, I did. You're right. 4 states. You do sneak around
through the corner there over by Pittsburgh.
That's true. Yeah, I drove last night after the game. I left State College at about 10:30 and drove straight from there to St. Clairsville, Ohio, which is on the other side of Wheeling. So that was like 3+ hours, and it's really not that bad, except that if anybody's ever driven up in the hills and mountainous areas of middle Pennsylvania, the weather just kind of changes from mile to mile. Sometimes it seems like, and you got to be careful on those slick roads. But here I am safely back in Indianapolis. Purdue basketball is at home Saturday against Maryland. Maryland's been playing Sunday. It's a noon tip-off, I believe.
Yes.
Maryland's playing pretty well. They had a 4-point loss
at Ohio State the other night.
They just bashed Ohio State. Yeah, they have a 4-point home loss to Marquette. I think is their only loss that they've taken this year. And I do think, though, however, especially based on what I saw Thursday night, Purdue may just be a different team at home than it is on the road, especially early this season with some young guys. I just think that can't be the case all season. At some
Right.
point, they've
No,
got to be better on the road.
and I know you've been away from this a little bit, but this has become kind of an annual tradition for Purdue to
Oh
go on
yeah,
the
no,
road
I
early
wrote
in the
about
Big
that.
Ten
Yeah,
season and get beat. Happened at Northwestern last year. Happened well, they lost at home to Rutgers a couple years ago. But yeah, Purdue's started from behind in the Big Ten season the last couple of years and been fine. And I think that Purdue, whether it wins the Big Ten or not, is still going to be fine. It's going to be a tournament team. Probably gets better from what happened at Penn State, but man, that was ugly and very hard to watch. And I'm glad that I was watching it on a laptop while also watching a volleyball match.
it's 6 of the last 7 that they've lost their Big Ten road opener, and the one that they won was an overtime game against Nebraska. So I think that's I think Vegas saw that coming last night. I think that's why Penn State was favored going into that game.
Still,
So
the only game that Fletcher Lawyer's ever dunked in was that Nebraska game.
well, it's
Purdue was one
notable
to
for
know when
so many
Fletcher Lawyer
reasons.
dunks.
Notable for so many reasons. Fletcher Lawyer not happy after that game last night with himself. Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman kind of similarly felt like they just didn't. When the pressure ratchets up and a team's kind of like constricting around them, um, that group is the one that's got to like lead Purdue out of it. And at least at this point of the season, and did not happen. 15 turnovers combined for the 3 of them. So
Do you make anything, but before we get off here, of the guys that came in and made it respectable at the end, the CJ Coxes and Brian Waddell's? Those are guys that, Brian Waddell doesn't get a lot of playing time. And I think maybe he capitalized on an opportunity to say, hey, give me another chance next time around. Or is it just so far out of reach that it didn't matter at that point?
The thing I make the most of is that they were down 27 with 10 minutes to play. That was what that game was. That game was not an 11-point game. That was a 27-point game with 10 minutes to play. That was a whooping. And more power to those guys who came in and played out the string. But, once a team is up by that much, and Penn State's putting in its own bench dudes too at that point, like, okay, whatever. All over but the shouting, really, once you're down 27 with under 10 to play. So that's the team that Purdue was that night. That was who they were. And that was who Penn State was on that night. Maybe Penn State can't be that every night. Purdue obviously won't be that every night. But I do think if you're trying to win a Big Ten championship and you're expecting to go, is it 18 or 20 conference games now? I keep getting confused. But if you're going to go, you're going to get your 9 or 10 or 8, whatever wins at home, but you can't go 5-5. Like, that's not going to win the Big Ten. Like, you've got to go on the road and beat good teams. And they definitely didn't do that last night.
All right. Well, we'll wrap that up, and probably, I guess, with the noon tip-off, we could have something Sunday after that game. It's not going to be 11 o'clock at night when we get out of here like it usually is. So,
well, Sunday could be interesting because, again, if it is somebody who's playing this weekend, they're off the clock as of Saturday night, whenever their game ends. And if name doesn't leak out Saturday, very good chance it could leak out Sunday. Brian Newbert from Golden Black was reminding me that when Daryl Hazel when that happened during a basketball game. I think that his name came out, that he was the one being hired. So, crazier things have happened, but we will be around. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon.